Welcome back to the show. Today, Amanda Rabideau helps founders and marketing teams turn big ideas into clear, compelling narratives that drive growth. After 2 decades as an expert shaping messaging strategy, she built Promanda AI to bring structure, alignment, and strategic clarity to the 0 to 1 phase of building a brand. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thanks for having me, Chelsey.
I'm pumped because we've been talking a lot about positioning, category design this month, and I feel like we need a bow at the end of this month and have that be messaging. So, thank you
Yeah.
for joining us to help clear this up. What is the difference between positioning and messaging?
The simple answer is messaging is the story you tell to communicate your position in the market, right? But if we want to dive even further into it, it's really the specific words that you're using to talk about your brand, your offering, your company, whatever it may be. And if you know where you want to be positioned in the market, you need a way to communicate that, and your strategic messaging should be aligned to communicating that properly to your target audience.
Is there a way a company can have strong positioning but weak messaging or vice versa? What does that look like?
I mean, it happens all the time, and in fact, so much of what happens in the content that we receive, which is call it the execution of that strategic messaging, so much of that content that we receive is to test if the message is correct and it's aligning to the positioning that you want in the market. And so, yes, you can certainly be doing one better than the other, but rarely, I think it's harder to have the positioning you want without the right messaging. I don't know if I can think of any examples where somehow a company was positioned correctly, but they had the wrong story.
Just in their own heads, they all knew what they were doing, but no one.
Very clear internally, but the external world was not on the same page.
Yes, this is a great segue. If there's unclear messaging, how can that create both internal friction and external friction?
Oh, so a good example is, think about if you go to a trade show or some sort of in-person event. And so you probably have multiple people asking you and your colleagues, "Oh, so tell me what Promanda does, or tell me what Nike does, or pick your company." And Chelsey, you answer one thing, I answer another thing. We have these conversations, great. And then let's say that same person, comes back around and they had spoken with me first. And then Chelsey, they go to you and they're like, "Hey, I talked to Amanda and she was saying Promanda is this AI based software that can help me with strategic messaging." And you're like, "Oh, really, we're more of a positioning company." And so that person, let's call him Jane Doe. Jane Doe's walking away thinking, "Wait, what does Promanda do?" You want to make sure that, of course, externally, you're all singing from the same song sheet, but also it starts internally too, because if you think and you're in accounting that we're doing positioning and your customer success thinks it's messaging or whatever, kind of misalignment happens, it's going to bleed into the market, because at the end of the day, you should all be swimming in the same direction, singing from the same song sheet, to say it again. So making sure that you have internal alignment will be a strong foundation to having external alignment.
I was just on a call yesterday. We spent 45 minutes on one sentence. And I was like, I know this is going to be painful, guys, but I'm having Amanda on tomorrow. She's going to tell us why this is so important. And it was like pulling teeth to get this one sentence, but we were all saying 3 different sentences before that. And I was like, we can't be doing this. We can't all say we're doing 3 different things.
Oh,
So,
no. And
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the example, that, because it seems, oh, it's just one sentence, why does it matter? And if I said to you, so Chelsey, do you have a dog by any chance?
I do.
You do.
His name's
Okay.
Aster.
So his name is Aster.
Uh-huh.
Oh, cute. What
16 and
kind
a
of dog is
half.
it?
He's a Maltipoo.
Oh, okay. So I used to have a chocolate lab. Let's say that you and I are chit chatting and we're talking about dogs, a Maltipoo and a chocolate lab, not the same dog, but they're both dogs. And so all of a sudden, if you're not making sure that the nuance and the detail and that you're being critical or picky about the words in the sentence, it's the difference between someone thinking that they bought a dog and they're taking home a multi-poo, but they walk home with a chocolate lab. That's a big surprise. If you're
Uh-huh.
expecting one thing and you get something different, there's no lying there. There's technically no miscommunication, but the fact that you didn't have the right messaging got in the way of having a happy customer because you got the wrong dog.
Yeah, so even after the sale, this will impact somebody. So they've signed up and what they heard from marketing, what they heard from sales isn't aligning with what the actual product does. And how does that impact the company?
I mean, you're probably going to lose customers. It could hurt you reputation, right? Because
Mhm.
especially in, I work a lot with startups and I'm a startup myself, that if you, Chelsey, if you have a bad experience and you're like, oh, I tried Promanda, oh my gosh, it wasn't at all what I thought it was. You might not go out of your way to say bad things, but if someone else asks, I miss an opportunity for another potential sale. And, at the end of the day, it ends up costing more money, right? Because you have to spend more to get new customers, or you spend money on customers that aren't the right fit. So there's a financial story certain to tell, but also, call it like a morale and a motivation story too, because if you keep getting the wrong customers, that could be frustrating internally and damage your brand.
Yeah, it's no fun for anybody. This is a perfect segue into your
No.
founder life. So you spent 2 decades as a messaging and strategy expert. Now why did you pivot into Promanda?
Well, starting in 2019, I began a fractional CMO business that evolved into an agency, Arch Collective. And prior to that, I'd been working at a large real estate data company, and part of my role was to lead product marketing for half the business. So a $500 million business. And so you can imagine, in a company where the product book is that thick, there's a lot of product messaging to do. And so from creating all that product messaging, my clients at Arch Collective were mostly B2B tech startups. Most of them had never heard of messaging. They were like, I need a website, I need, a blog or what have you. And I created this reputation for messaging, right? It's something I had to do for products. I had to do for most of my companies and their products, sometimes even their executives. And let's jump ahead to around 2023. This is when, ChatGPT and AI first hit my radar. And I'm like, oh, great. I have a series of inputs, I have a series of outputs. This can help me be so much more efficient at creating messaging for not just my fractional clients, but the other clients that were coming in just for messaging. And so I built it. And the short story is some other friends in the marketing space were like, oh, can I get that? I want that. And I thought, oh, maybe this isn't an Amanda problem or an Arch Collective problem. It's something broader. So I created Promanda for marketers originally, and then it's expanded. And now folks who don't have a marketing background are finding it helpful, like solopreneurs or consultants, or like teachers who are having their sourdough side hustle, if you will. And because at the end of the day, you can't launch anything without words, right? Yes, you can do videos. Yes, you can have visuals, and you need those. And those are important to bringing those words to life. But the same way, you don't typically, illustrate a book and then write the story to follow. You write the story and then you use the visuals to bring it to life. These companies and these people need a story to tell. And if we jump now to 2026, obviously AI is caught on, we're using it. It's become part of our daily lives far more than it was in 2023. But that's adding another layer of challenge, which is, how do I not sound like everyone else? How do I tell a story that isn't the same as every other sourdough maker out there, or, fractional CFO, or whatever your business may be? So it's really to give marketers or, entrepreneurs or whoever needs a story, a way to strategically craft their story to make sure that it resonates and it doesn't sound like everyone else.
And people can go on and do a trial to test it out and play around with it too, right?
Absolutely. Yes. We have a 5-day trial, so people can pop in and give it a go and, see if it's helpful and get their messaging framework for free.
There you go. What is this 0 to 1 messaging that I've heard of?
Yes. The 0 to 1 messaging is, think of it as the kind of like the hardest messaging to create because, and I'll go back to my book analogy. It's really hard to write the book or the original manuscript for that book. And to all the editors out there, I'm not saying your job is easy because editing is challenging, but it's a different skill to say, okay, these are the words, let me make it better, let me improve it. And so Promanda helps, like that fear of the white page, right? Where it's, I've got all these inputs. How do I start to synthesize it? How do I even begin to tell the story? So realistically, Promanda helps you do that. But there's also all sorts of tools in there and ways that you can revise and do that efficiently and effectively and try out different scenarios and play with it. So there's still ways to edit and revise. But really, it's to help those folks who are like, I don't even know how to get started. I can help you with that. Or that have said, I just spend, 3 hours in ChatGPT and I cannot get what I want done. We give you a structured process to help extract those insights to get you great messaging.
How do you know if your messaging is good and it's landing with the folks you want it to land with?
That is where you do need to put it into the marketplace and test it. And there's ways you can do it that cost money, and there's ways you can do it that cost time, if you will. But at the end of the day, it's really about getting the messaging out there. And so if anyone's interested, how do you test it without, spending money and maybe just time? Something that I've talked a ton about and I'm a huge believer in are like voice of client or voice of customer calls. And I was actually speaking at UNC to one of the MBA classes last week. And I was reminded of this thing my dad used to say to me when I was early in my career, which is STP. And he did not mean Stone Temple Pilots. And yes, I know I'm old enough that I remember that. But he used to say STP, see the people. And by that, it's, if you aren't out there talking to your audience and understanding like where's their head out, how have they evolved, what pain are they focused on, then it's going to be hard, one, to create great messaging, but two, you can use that same audience to test that messaging, right? If you're out there talking about what you're doing and what you're selling, and it may be friendlies, it may be people that someone introduced you to, but a great way to test messaging and see it before you spend money on campaigns is to just test it out talking to people. Not to mention, the more you meet people in your target audience, the better your product will be, the better your messaging will be, the better everything will be. So I really don't see any downside to that. And then the obvious way is, you can put it into the market and spend money and, A/B test different messages and things like that. I wish I had a silver bullet on how that works, but I have seen where you can create like synthetic audiences and things like that and test it out that way. And I think that can give you a good direction as well. But I would err on, and I've always defaulted to talking to the people, testing it there, then refining it, and then spending money putting it to the market.
If somebody's shy, or is there a way to have somebody else test this if they're too shy to talk to people? There are a lot of founders that are not the public founder. They're more behind the scenes folks. Can they have somebody else on their team talk to the people or hire somebody?
This is going to be my tough love moment. No.
Okay.
And nor should you want to. And I get it, it's hard to put yourself out there, and one here, if you're asking for direct feedback, you're like, oh my God, are they going to say mean things or am I going to embarrass myself? But if you are truly interested in growing your business and getting the right messaging and you aren't out there one-on-one talking to people, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. So it's pump yourself up, listen to I Am the Tiger or whatever your song is, I don't know, but go out there and have the conversation. And as someone who's probably done hundreds, if not close to 1,000 voice of client calls in my life, I would say rarely are people going to be cruel to you. Like it's a lot easier to get behind, your keyboard on social media and say mean things than it is for me to be like, wow, Chelsey, this was terrible and get really mean. So the likelihood of that happening is low. And even if they were, remember that like that feedback is a gift because they just saved you potentially thousands of dollars on crappy messaging or hundreds of hours on like implementing it and paying for content and whatnot. So maybe, it's like reframing what an intense conversation could be Think of it as a positive thing, maybe not fun, but like the more you do it, the easier it should get to.
That was the tough love section of the show, everybody.
Yes,
I love
yes.
it.
You've got this.
Why would teams skip messaging? Because I'm sure it happens a lot. Just skip this whole step.
I mean, because we're an instant gratification kind of world, right? It's like you want to go from, the, hey, I've got this thing, let's get it into market. There's a few other reasons that having worked with a lot of founders specifically on messaging, and there's the reality of founders have 500 things that they need to do in a day where they can maybe do 10, right? So
Mm.
it's okay, this exercise of coming up with messaging may not feel like the highest priority, and like other things could be bubbling up, like a customer issue or fundraising or what have you. So I get it. Like it's, maybe not the highest priority. However, my argument back to those folks would be, one, if you spend the time now and we focus on it, it's the proverbial J curve. Yes, maybe you slow down as we're creating messaging, but it will allow us to take off. Whereas if you don't spend the time, this is something we're just going to be constantly chasing, and you're going to end up spending more time, more money, and slowing down the growth of your company if we don't focus on it. The other piece, and specifically with founders, and this is hard to deal with, is sometimes they don't actually know what the story is. They may think that they've got value. They may think they understand the problem they're solving. They may think they understand where they fit in the market, but they don't. And so you may hear things like, I'll know it when I see it, or I don't know, that's not right. Tell me why it's not right. I don't know, it doesn't feel right. That usually is indicative of, call it a bigger problem. And so asking, and already going back to my 500 things in a day where you can do 10, we're asking them to do something that it does involve thinking and sometimes a mental heavy lifting. And if you're not a marketer and this isn't your background, it could feel uncomfortable. You could feel like a failure. You could feel like, I'm the CEO of the company, I should know this. And so I think there's a lot of psychology that goes into why they don't prioritize it. And then, frankly, some of them might not understand the value, right? And as marketers, we typically know, oh, if we get the story right, then we can build everything from it, just like a foundation on a home. You can build a really strong structure. But if that education, or we're not communicating that to the people that we're helping build messaging, then you're going to, see that it doesn't become a priority and it often gets skipped.
How do you see this messaging as infrastructure, not just copywriting?
I'll go back to my house analogy, where it's this word to the story, how that business is, and positioning does come into play. Who's your audience? How do you want to talk to them? All of that is part of your messaging as much as the words are. Like those things are fundamental to everything else you do in the business. And whether it's how someone in your biz dev team crafts an email to reach out to someone, or how you respond to negative feedback on social media, and to that point, like I love I want to say it's Wendy's who like sometimes has these kind of like snarky comments on their social media back to people. Like that's a deliberate choice in their voice, right? And if someone's really nice and empathetic and understanding, and then the next time they're like snarky, you kind of can get brand misalignment. So going back to infrastructure, if you have that messaging framework and you understand who we're talking to, how we're talking to them, and what we're saying, and what our tone is, and the types of words we use and what we don't use, then, that's going to give you that your brand and your communication a foundation that you, the marketing team, as well as the rest of the organization can build on.
And is this a one-time project that you do, or is this something that you revisit over time?
Yes, it's so funny, Chelsey, that you bring that up, because way back, like way back 5 years ago, creating messaging was something that I might do. Okay, we're good for a year, right? Now, some of it was the practicality of if you've got a bunch of products and whatnot, you can't just be, like every day updating the messaging, because that will also confuse the market. But
Uh-huh.
today, things are moving at a pace, unlike 5 years ago, unlike 3 years ago, maybe even like unlike a year ago, which is kind of
Mhm.
crazy to think of. So I'm not saying you want to overhaul your messaging, every time the market changes, but are there Are there words that now are taking on different meaning, right? Are there words that are overplayed? I'll give you a great example there. So we've all heard the term AI slop, right? There was, call it summer of last year through the fall. I feel like that term kind of like peaked or got oversaturated October, November of last year. And you're still seeing it, but it doesn't have the same effect. We kind of are like, oh, it's gray. We're like, okay, we can just ignore that because we're desensitized to it. And so if that's something that you're using, and I'll be honest, it's a term that I used as well, but I've had to take it out because I'm like, this is no longer resonating. So you do need to be conscious of what's happening in the marketplace, but there's a difference between evaluating your messaging and like evaluating and changing your core brand and your core story. You want to keep aspects of who you are the same, right? If you are values based around we are all going to always going to be making the choice that's the most sustainable or what have you, that shouldn't change, but maybe some of the words you use that are relevant today or that you can't use today, obviously as laws and government changes, sometimes that forces a change in our messaging too. So it's like messaging needs to be reviewed, I would say quarterly, maybe tweaked, maybe not, depending on what your industry is and what's going on in it.
This speed and the introduction of AI everywhere. I know it's been around since the 50s, but really in our lives everywhere. How has that changed messaging in terms of making it more approachable or accessible or making it scarier and worse? How's it impacted messaging in general?
All of the things you just said, that's what it's done. It's certainly made parts of it more approachable. And a question I get a lot is, why would I use Promanda? I can just go into insert the name of any LLM you like, Grok, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, Kimi, pick your poison. And my response is usually, okay, then go use that. But 9 times out of 10, and in fact, I was listening to a podcast on the journal, and it was about this idea that the more we've used AI, and you're right, it's been around for a long time, but like in our day-to-day lives in the last couple of years, that what we thought was great and remarkable, and call it, February 19th in 2024, our bar for what's remarkable was higher on February 19th of 2025, and it's even higher on this date in 2026. And kind of going back to the term AI slop, like as humans, we process things and we get used to things, and so we need new stimuli. And so ChatGPT and all of the LLMs out there, they can help with messaging, but what their job is and how they work is really it's the probability of this, if they're providing you the probability of the best answer, or the next best answer, or the right answer. And so with messaging, that means that like the likelihood of the output is that it's going to be aligned with what else is out there because that's what's their job as the AI to do. Things like nuance and specificity and how you make messaging interesting, that's not necessarily what it was set up to do. And so in a process like what I built in Promanda, it's a structured process. So think of it, when I was in college, we did this course called Creativity in Business. And I love this lesson. I mean, gosh, this is 26 years old now that I'm thinking about it, but the idea was if someone gives you a white sheet of paper and think of that white sheet of paper as like you need to create messaging. If I say, hey, Chelsey, create messaging, and you're like, okay, or I'm like, here's a white sheet of paper, draw a picture on it. The ability to come up with something creative and interesting is really hard because there's no constraints and parameters. Whereas if I said, hey, let's come up with messaging, answer these questions, upload these documents, and I give you this process, all of a sudden there's a different output that's going to come. The same way that if I said, all right, Chelsey, draw a picture, you can use 3 colors. It needs to be an outdoor scene depicting a person and their dog, maybe a multi-boo. And then all of a sudden, where did your brain go? You're like, oh, and maybe you pictured your house. Maybe you pictured, the lake that you go to in the summer. But like all of a sudden, your ability to create that messaging is there. And so Promanda is that structured tool in a way that like those parameters and constraints are helping you draw that picture.
So you were able to take from your years of being the messaging expert and build like a mini you. It's cute. It's your name too, right? Like it's like all the frameworks you probably use with your clients. Now everyone can get. Is that
Yes,
true? Okay.
exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of it that is reflective of my analog process because, I was creating messaging, back before there was Chat GPT, can we imagine? And a lot of it was ironically, talking to people. And I still would encourage, I don't know if you're going to ask me this, but I am often asked, what's one thing I could do today to grow my business or make my business better? And I'm always like, pick up the phone and talk to people who are like either your customers or your target audience because that is what I always did. And I'll tell you a fun story, and this is an old one, but I was in sales for an orthodontic startup and I wanted to move out of sales. And so they're like, fine, create your own job. And I'm like, okay.
Oh.
And so I happened to be going to the dentist that week. And so dentists refer clients to orthodontists. And I was chatting with my dental hygienist and like I had a clogged saliva duct in my lip, very specific, I know. And I was in my 20s and she's, oh, I noticed you have, this bump on your lip, this and that. And we should talk to the dentist about it. Dentist comes in and he's, oh, go to these 2 or 3 people. They can take care of that. And he left the room and the hygienist came back in, who of course you spend like 45 minutes with and the dentist you spend 5. And she said to me, she's, do not go to any of those people. She's like, you need to go to a plastic surgeon. She's like, you're 20. I was living in Dallas. So she's, you're 20. You can't ruin your face. How are you going to find someone to marry you? And I was like, oh my God. Like I hadn't thought someone could really watch this. So she was like, gave me a couple names. Who do you think I called? The dentist first, the recommendations, or the hygienist? So long story short, I was like, maybe this is how other people are like getting referrals to orthodontists. And this is a long story, I get it. But then I started talking to other dental hygienists and I'm like, hey, are you giving referrals? Like what do your clients say or your patients, I should say? And anyway, like I went out there and I kind of uncovered this interesting nugget just by talking to people, right? And saying, okay, now I have a hypothesis. I'm going to go talk to more people and test it. And I could have found out that I was the edge case. But what I found out was that this is like very common practice. And so we ended up creating this whole program around educating dental hygienists around our technology and, the rest is history. But the point is that the like going out there and talking to people and hearing what they have to say, if there is anything that you want to really impact your messaging, using that because they're often going to give you words or insights or help you make, the connective tissue to find those nuances or interesting things that things like technology can't alone help you do. We still need the humans in the process for messaging to be standout.
This makes me so hopeful. Sometimes the AI conversations can be a little gloom and doom, but I love that you're saying get out there and talk to people, have real conversations with real humans, and then use the software. What's it like
Yes.
being a tech founder?
What part of it? That's a big question.
Just in general, just all of your life. What's your life like?
I'm married and I have 2 kids, and I've said from the beginning that if I'm going to be starting a software business, and let's say I grew it and sold it for $1 billion, but if I lost my marriage and I lost my relationship with my kids, I wouldn't call it successful. So like to me, it's really important to prioritize my family, the other roles I have in addition to being a founder. So my world is equally very structured and unstructured. And by that, I mean, I couldn't live my life without both my Google Calendar and my Skylight, which is one of those like visual calendars that hangs in our kitchen with all of my kids' activities and, my travels and my husband's and all that. Cause he, is working as well. He's in the tech space. And, it's very structured. And if it's not on the calendar, it's not happening. Like we live by our schedule. But at the same time, my schedule, I don't work 8 to 5, I work maybe 5 in the morning to 7. And then, it could be that I'm not working 3 to 5, or I'm doing that all in the car or wherever I'm taking my kids to. If it's my day to pick up and drop off, and then I could be working 8 to midnight. So that's the unstructured piece of it. And so I would say if anyone's thinking about starting a company or what have you, you have to be extremely mentally fit. And I think later you're going to ask about books and stuff, but I'll show it to you now. This book right here, it's called Tennis: The Mind Game. You might be like, what the heck does tennis have to do with a messaging startup? But I was a tennis player back in my high school days, and I really wanted to play singles. I didn't want to play on a doubles team. And so I read this book, and there's all sorts of tips about how you walk away from points you lose, what you do in between points. I mean, read the book if you're a tennis player for sure. But long story short, I did everything. Like I was like, okay, if it told me to do this, I'm going to do it. And I did it. And I ended up winning the state championship that year. So like I would say it was effective. But those things that I thought about, when I was 16, 17 years old, now some 30 years later as a founder, like those skills that I developed playing tennis in my mental game are so much a part of my day, because be prepared to hear a lot of no's. And I know you read that, but like it's really different to experience it. Be prepared to question everything about like your life choices or what have you. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you have a strong mental game, you can get past that. If you have a strong support system, you can get past that. But it's not what the movies and the PR makes it sound like. And it's the proverbial, there's a lot of startups that are overnight successes, but when you look, they were started 6 or 7 years ago. So, realize that this is a long path. It's not going to happen overnight. And if it does, good for you. That's awesome. But don't set the expectation. That's what should happen.
In it for the long haul. If you're not
Yep.
willing to put a few years into it, you probably shouldn't
Yep.
give it a go at all.
I mean, I built the first version of Promanda I started it in October of 2023. And I mean, and really launched something like the first commercial version was really out November of 25. So 2 years later, it's crazy sometimes for me to think, oh, I've been doing this for 2.5 years now.
That's cool. Well, you already answered the question. What's the one thing somebody should do when they go out and go out and talk to people? Is there anything that you're listening to? We got the book. Anything you're listening to or watching or reading that you are loving these days?
I may not watch tons of TV, but when I do watch it, I usually like something that is funny, right?
Uh-huh.
To lighten the load, or, interesting, what have you. And so I will in 2 shows. One, which if you haven't watched Fisk on Netflix, I highly recommend it.
Okay.
Fisk. It's very dry humor. It's about an estate planning attorney in Australia. Worth the watch. And then I probably, like a lot of people in the world, I did watch Heated Rivalry and got, sucked into that swirl, and would also recommend that.
All right. I haven't seen either of those, so this is great. Loading me up. And the book is called Tennis: The Mind Game.
Yes, I'll put it back up here. Just so you know, I tried to find at my parents' house my original version, because I reread this about a year ago, and I ended up finding it on Amazon, and like I couldn't find the book, so I don't think it's being published anymore. So you might need to go to your local library. So
Yeah.
cheers for libraries.
If somebody finds a crate of them out there, let us know, and we'll post a link to your garage or something. We'll let people know where they can find it.
Great.
What's one skill that you're sharpening or focused on learning this year?
It's funny, there's so many things. I'm a big goals person. I'm always like, okay, focus on this, work on that. Now you've done that, do this. I think that like the thing that I would like to perfect is my ability to focus. And it seems so small. I think it's the hardest thing to do. It's easy with like Slack pop-ups and then like text messages and emails and all the different stimuli, or if I'm working and my kids are home, of course, them coming in. But I think, having that carved out focus time, whether it's I can think creatively or I can tackle those big problems. And I think it's so easy to schedule your day and not leave room for that because it doesn't seem like a priority. But one thing that I started to do, and I'm In fact, I haven't done it this week, but it has been raining. That's my excuse. But carving out time to go walk. I live in San Francisco, and most of the time we have beautiful weather. And so walking at the beach. And when I go there, I am not looking at anything. Oftentimes I'm not listening to anything, but I just walk along the water for 40 minutes and use that as my time to kind of just let my brain process big problems or things that I can't figure out. And so I would love to be able to fit more of that kind of space into my day, because sometimes I'm like, oh my God, this is a waste of my time. And then afterwards, I'm like, that's probably the best 40 minutes I spent all day. And so carving out that time to be really intentional and not on a screen and let myself focus on different things.
That's lovely. I think I'm being inspired to do it myself. I have lunch and walk in my calendar, and you know how many days I don't do either?
No judgment there. No judgment.
Well,
So I joined, by the way, real quick, I joined this group through a company called Major Futures. I'm friends with Jeremy, who started Jeremy. My God, I can't think of his last name. So I always call him Jeremy Futures, which is not his name. And so I'm like, we joke about it, how I get his name wrong. And we've been friends. We've been working together for 5 years now. But at any rate, it's a group for, people who are career transitioning or like founders themselves. And they just kind of need like a support group. And I joined it as a way to help out with Promanda, with Promanda and messaging. But the question the other day that they asked was around, sometimes it's really hard to start new things and to do things like, what's people's advice for like when you need to start something new? And this kind of goes back to I do that too, where I put things in my calendar, and I just said I live by my calendar, but like some of those things like go outside or like free time to think when I get work done, those get, easily taken over. But I received advice once to like figure out what is the smallest step you can take if you have a big goal. So it could be like, if you have on your calendar, take a walk at lunch, putting your shoes by the door of your office, or like after your call, before lunch or something, like putting on your sneakers. And it's like, that's the smallest action. Just put on the shoes to go for the walk. And how if you kind of do these really small things, it can help lead to the bigger things. And I thought it was a really interesting way to approach things. So I might say, put your shoes on, in the morning or something. And so you have them on. So it helps you take that walk at lunch.
Yeah, I like it. I'm not gonna whip my leg up, but I got new walking shoes yesterday.
Amazing.
I'm ready. They're on my feet.
I think that's a really important part too, Chelsey. Buy the new shoes for the walking. That's like real important.
Step one.
Yes.
Make the goal with step one. Step two, get the shoes. Always get the shoes.
Yes, always.
Well, we'll link to Promanda and everything below so that people can find you. Where do you hang out most online?
I'm on LinkedIn a lot. That's where I spend most of my time, because most of my clients are on the business side. And so if you're looking for me, find me there, just as my name is spelled.
All right. Well, we'll link below. Thank you so much for sharing your story about Promanda and all your wisdom about messaging today.
Thank you, Chelsey. Appreciate you having me.
Talk to you soon.